Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. I'm going to start out tonight with William Christopher, who died recently at the age of 84. William Christopher was from Evanston, Illinois, went to school at New Trier High School right around here, and as an actor he had a semi-regular part in the Gomer Pyle series in the mid-60s. He was also in The Fortune Cookie, but he became famous for his role as Father Mulcahy in the television version of MASH. He was playing the role that Brene Auberjonois played in the movie version, and he played it a little more subdued.
I think the writers wanted MASH to be real, to tell some real true stories. And the chaplains were there, and they were important. Father Mulcahy was trying to send a message to the wounded of giving them courage and strength and giving them a feeling that there was a reason for what they were going through. Mulcahy's presence is a help. They know he's not a doctor, but they know he's an ear that they can bend and that they can count on. Mulcahy is there for that, and our chaplains are there for that.
Probably the most famous single episode he was in was the interview series, where a war correspondent interviews all the main characters from the 4077.
When the doctors cut into a patient, and it's cold, the way it is now, today, steam rises from the body, and the doctor will warm himself over the open wound. Could anyone look on that and not feel changed?
Although he was playing a Catholic priest in the series, he was actually a Methodist. But here he's doing a little Jewish stick and doing the Misha Beirach for a patient that Trapper John is operating on.
What do you think, Father? Should I sign it? This is the one the cowboy brought in? Yeah, he lost a lot of blood. Goldstein. Think he'd mind? Misha Beirach Avoseno Avraham Yitzchok B'Yakov Uyevarek Vera Teas Hachol Leib Shloima Goldstein.
Funny, he doesn't look it.
Whatever you say, Father.
And William Christopher brought his Father Mulcahy character to the MASH follow-up series after MASH, which wasn't very good, but he was pretty good in it.
Excuse me, Miss Cox, have you seen patient Gordon? I'm supposed to be keeping an eye on him, but he's sort of slipped away.
I don't think so. What does he look like?
How can I say this? From the back, he wears a robe.
Oh, fat man. No, thank goodness I haven't seen him.
Are you sure?
Father, if a man did that to me, wouldn't I know it?
All right.
Like I say, after MASH was a considerable drop-off from MASH. Anyway, we're going to move to sports now with Milt Schmidt, who died recently at the age of 98, one of the great hockey players in Boston Bruin history. He was a nice German boy from Kitchener, Ontario, and he brought them 2 Stanley Cups in 1939 and 1941 as the center on the Kraut Line, with his fellow Germans Woody Dumart and Bobby Orr. He had a great career interrupted by the war, then he became the Bruins coach, but his other notable accomplishment was he was the general manager and the talent scout who found Bobby Orr probably the greatest player in Bruin history. Here's an NHL report on the Hall of Famer Milt Schmidt.
In 1940, 22-year-old Milt Schmidt had an all-star season, capturing the NHL scoring title as the Krauts became the dominant forward line of their day.
We became almost an instant success. So much so that in 39-40, the first time in history in the National Hockey League, Woody Dumart, Bobby Orr, and Milt Schmidt, we finished 1, 2, 3 in the scoring race in the National Hockey League, which was never, ever done before. In 40-41, we win the Stanley Cup again. Then, unfortunately, 4 years arrived. Otherwise, we would have had quite a dynasty, I think.
In 1942, Schmidt, Dumart, and Bauer exchanged Bruins jerseys for the uniform of the Royal Canadian Air Force. During the war years, Milt, Bobby, and Woody kept their game sharp, playing for military teams. While the line remained together, the Krauts was no longer an appropriate nickname.
When we got back, I think the buddy line lasted maybe about a month. And it got right back to the Krauts. We finished our career as a line with the name the Krauts.
In 1945, Milt Schmidt returned to the Bruins, where the rugged centerman soon regained his all-star form. The 1950-51 season was filled with personal triumph for Schmidt, as he was named captain of the Bruins and received the Hart Trophy as league MVP.
that number 15 for the Boston Bruins was somebody very special out on the ice. He was a player that seemed to be so dominant in that era of being not only a good, talented player, but a very tough hockey player at the same time. He could take it, but he could also dish it out.
Well, you touch that guy, I guarantee you this, he got your number. And those years we were playing 14 games against each other. 7 out of town, 7 at home. He had plenty of time. Not only a great player, he's a gentleman. Off the ice, on the ice, he was always the same guy. But Milt Schmidt, he's always going to have my respect.
A lot of times I get asked, who's your all-star team, all-time all-star team? And I name one. And when they got it all in, I says, but if you give me 5 guys named Milt Schmidt, I'll put my grandmother in the net and we'll beat all of them. And they said, are you kidding? I said, that's how great he was.
On Christmas Day, 1954, Milt Schmidt retired as a player, immediately taking on a new role, coach of the Boston Bruins.
First 3 years I coached. Went to the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years out of the 3. I thought, well, what an easy job. And for some reason or other, the players that we got, rigor mortis set in. And eventually we were down and down. Coaching didn't become a nice job anymore. It was just more of a challenge than anything else. Things didn't come natural. You're trying to do something with something that just was not there. And that is the toughest job of all, of coaching.
While Milt Schmidt and the Boston Bruins were finding it a struggle to compete with the NHL's best, a routine scouting trip found a savior on the horizon.
We went up to see 2 players play that particular night by the name of Eaton and Higgins. They were soon forgotten because we saw this little kid, this little towhead, crew-cut kid with his pants down below his knees on the defense, and he just took things over by himself. Eaton and Higgins never were a part of the Boston Bruins after that. We concentrated on Bobby Orr.
The 1966 arrival of superstar defenseman Bobby Orr signaled a change for the Bruins. The following summer, a blockbuster trade found the perfect teammate for the great Orr. Goal-scoring sensation Phil Esposito. The Bruins were now the most powerful team in the game. With Schmidt as general manager, they captured the Stanley Cup in 1970 and 72, their first since the glory days of the Kraut Line.
You don't realize the tremendous feeling to be associated with such great players until after it's all over and you sit down and you let it sink in and say, boy, wasn't that wonderful? We would have played for next to nothing if the truth be known to play in the National Hockey League, whereas hundreds of thousands of kids during those years would have loved to have been in the same shoes as Woody, Bobby, and Milt. Overall, I'd love to do it all over again with the same amount of money, the same injuries. Let's go.
Well, we're going to move from sports to physics now with Dr. Edwin Goldwasser, who died recently at the age of 97. A nice Jewish boy from Manhattan, went to Horace Mann, went to Harvard, then did his physics training at Berkeley. In the early 1950s, he moved to the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, became one of the most important physicists in the country, and was the co-founder of the Fermi Lab in Batavia, Illinois. Fermi Lab does some of the most important particle physics research in the world. Physics Illinois wrote of Dr. Goldwasser that he vigorously pursued both research and teaching as a member of the faculty. He was the author of numerous technical publications on the properties of cosmic rays, energy loss of charged particles, photon interactions, and elementary particle interactions. He took a leading role in efforts by a consortium of Midwestern universities in the 1950s and 60s to strengthen their research facilities in high-energy physics and to locate a national accelerator in the central United States. A dedicated and inspiring teacher, Goldwasser wrote the then-influential introductory textbook Optics, Waves, Atoms, and Nuclei in 1965 and led the University of Illinois contingent to the Physical Science Study Committee, a collaborative effort by Illinois and MIT to create a modern high school physics curriculum. The resulting textbook and teacher's guide, PSSC Physics, to which Goldwasser was a major contributor, transformed the way that physics was taught in American high schools post-Sputnik. His overreaching goal in teaching physics was to reveal to students what he called the beauty of physics, its support of the unflinching drive of human beings to understand more about their surroundings, from the submicroscopically small to the unlimitedly large. In 1967, with an Illinois site chosen by the United States Atomic Energy Commission as the location of the nation's new National Accelerator Laboratory, now called Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, Goldwasser took an extended leave of absence from the University of Illinois to serve as deputy director of the new facility in Batavia, Illinois. As a founder of one of the nation's premier scientific facilities, Goldwasser oversaw the construction of the laboratory, completing it on time and under budget, scheduled its experimental program, and implemented its groundbreaking equal employment program. Dr. Robert Wilson, Fermilab director, said of Goldwasser in 1978, "The successes of the laboratory, the firm foundation for the future, the cultural ambiance, the spirit of opportunity for all, the international importance of our work are all monuments to his sense of the value of science and its place in our society." I have to tell you, I sort of feel obligated to pay tribute to physicists on this show because I was such a poor physics student myself. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps, and we're going to close tonight with Sister Frances Carr, who died recently at the age of 89. She was the third last living Shaker in the United States. Sister Carr lived in Sabbathday, the last remaining Shaker village. The Shakers arrived in the United States in 1774 and started a community in upstate New York in 1776. They practiced celibacy, so the only way they got new members was through new converts or children who were orphaned or left to them. By the middle of the 19th century, there were actually between 5,000 and 6,000 of them, but with the Civil War, the rise of social services, and the urbanization of America, their membership has dwindled to now just 2, Brother Arnold Had and Sister June Carpenter. The Shaker name comes from their worship service. They were originally known as the Shaking Quakers. Here's a report on Sabbathday Village.
As a spiritual seeker, I think I've always been fascinated by religious utopian societies, by their idealism, ambition, their attempt to create a heaven on earth. And the Shakers are definitely one of these communities. This is Anthony Chirazi. I'm the author of the article, The Last of the Shakers for Busted Halo, the last active Shaker community in the world, called Sabbathday Lake in southern Maine. The Shakers are basically a pious Christian charismatic group that came to America from England in 1774. By the mid-1800s, they had about 6,000 members, 19 communities. But today, with a mean age of about 65, there's only 3 active members left, and they're all at Sabbathday. What's fascinating about the Shakers is simply that they lasted so long. Most utopian communities lasted a very short period of time, but the Shakers have lasted over 200 years and are still counting. One of the interesting characteristics of the Shakers is that they believe in strict celibacy. They gain members through adoption and through conversion. But the Shakers want everyone to know today that they're still open for business. In fact, they still receive at least 2 inquiries a week. And I was told that members have lasted from 20 years to 1 day. As a spiritual explorer, I've learned a lot from the Shakers. And I think one of the biggest things I learned is that it underscored for me the power of religious devotion to create and build. Some social scientists contend that the Shakers' longevity was predicated on their religious convictions, which sort of compelled and motivated them to succeed as a community. This really highlighted for me the power of faith and religion. And it also reminded me that America was founded on religious convictions, and maybe even the same utopian ideal. When the Puritans arrived in America, they wrote in the Mayflower Compact that they came to the New World for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith. Another thing I learned is that the spiritual path is a long one. One Shaker told me that he once asked an older Shaker what she has learned so far in her spiritual path. And she said that at the age of 84, that she's just beginning to take her first step. But the heart of Shakerism, as testified by their architecture, I think is simplicity. To live communally, collectively, prayerfully, modestly, like Christ and his early disciples. And this Shaker song, Simple Gifts, is one of their most popular ones, and perhaps best epitomizes the faith.
Tis a gift to be simple, tis a gift to be free, tis a gift to come down and be happy. And when we find ourselves in a place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed to tell. will be a delight.